the unicorns learned to swing downwind from any lone woods goats. If they smelled a man inside the goatskin, they charged him and killed him. With the return of the last hunters, everything was done that could be done in preparation for summer. Inventory was taken of the total food supply, and it was even smaller than Lake had feared. It would be far from enough to last until fall brought the game back from the north, and he instituted rationing much stricter than before. The heat increased as the yellow sun blazed hotter and the blue sun grew larger. Each day the vegetation was browner, and a morning came when Lake could see no green wherever he looked. They numbered 1,110 that morning, out of what had so recently been 4,000. 1,110 thin, hungry scarecrows, who already could do nothing more than sit listlessly in the shade and wait for the hell that was coming. He thought of the food supply, so pitifully small, and of the months it would have to last. He saw the grim, inescapable future for his charges. Famine. There was nothing he could do to prevent it. He could only try to forestall complete starvation for all by cutting rations to the bare existence level. And that would be bare existence for the stronger of them. The weaker were already doomed. He had them all gather in front of the caves that evening, when the terrace was in the shadow of the ridge. He stood before them and spoke to them. "All of you know we have only a fraction of the amount of food we need to see us through the summer. Tomorrow the present ration will be cut in half. That will be enough to live on, just barely. If that cut isn't made, the food supply will be gone long before fall, and all of us will die. If anyone has any food of any kind, it must be turned in to be added to the total supply. Some of you may have thought of your children and kept a little hidden for them. I can understand why you should do that, but you must turn it in. There may possibly be some who hid food for themselves personally. If so, I give them the first and last warning. Turn it in tonight. If any hidden cache of food is found in the future, the one who hid it will be regarded as a traitor and murderer. All of you, but for the children, will go into the chamber next to the one where the food is stored. Each of you, and there will be no exceptions, regardless of how innocent you are, will carry a bulkily folded cloth or garment. Each of you will go into the chamber alone. There will be no one in there. You will leave the food you have folded in the cloth, if any, and go out the other exit and back to your caves. No one will ever know whether the cloth you carried contained food or not. No one will ever ask. Our survival on this world, if we are to survive at all, can be only by working and sacrificing together. There can be no selfishness. What any of you may have done in the past is of no consequence. Tonight we start anew. From now on, we trust one another without reserve. There will be one punishment for any who betray that trust: death. Anders set the example by being the first to carry a folded cloth into the cave. Of them all, Lake heard later, only Bemin voiced any real indignation, warning all those in his section of the line that the order was the first step toward outright dictatorship and a police and spy system, in which Lake and the other leaders would deprive them all of freedom and dignity. Bemin insisted upon exhibiting the emptiness of the cloth he carried, an action that, had he succeeded in persuading the others to follow his example, would have mercilessly exposed those who did have food they were returning. But no one followed Bemin's example, and no harm was done. As for Lake, he had worries on his mind of much greater importance than Bemin's enmity. The weeks dragged by, each longer and more terrible to endure than the one before it, as the heat steadily increased. Summer solstice arrived, and there was no escape from the heat, even in the deepest caves. There was no night. The blue sun rose in the east as the yellow sun set in the west. There was no life of any kind to be seen, not even an insect. Nothing moved across the burned land but the swirling dust devils and shimmering, distorted mirages. The death rate increased with appalling swiftness. The small supply of canned and dehydrated milk, fruit, and vegetables was reserved exclusively for the children, but it was far insufficient in quantity. The Ragnarok herbs prevented any recurrence of the fatal deficiency disease, but they provided virtually no nourishment to help fight the heat and gravity. The stronger of the children lay wasted and listless on their pallets, while the ones not so strong died each day. Each day, thin and hollow-eyed mothers would come to plead with them to save their children. "It would take so little to save his life. Please, before it's too late." But there was so little food left, and the time was yet so long until fall would bring relief from the famine, that he could only answer each of them with a grim and final no. And watch the last hope flicker and die in their eyes, and watch them turn away to go and sit for the last hours beside their children. Bemin became increasingly irritable and complaining as the rationing and heat made existence a misery, insisting that Lake and the others were to blame for the food shortage, that their hunting efforts had been bungling and faint-hearted. And he implied, without actually saying so, that Lake and the others had forbidden him to go near the food chamber because they did not want a competent, honest man to check up on what they were doing. There were 603 of them in the blazing afternoon when the girl, Julia, could stand his constant, vindictive fault-finding no longer. Lake heard about it shortly afterward, the way she had turned on Bemin in a flare of temper she could control no longer, and said, "Whenever your mouth is still, you can hear the children who are dying today, but you don't care. All you think of is yourself. You claim Lake and the others were cowards, but you didn't dare hunt with them. You keep insinuating that they're cheating us and eating more than we are, but your belly is the only one that has any fat left on it." She never completed the sentence. Bemin's face turned livid in sudden, wild fury, and he struck her, knocking her against the rock wall so hard that she slumped unconscious to the ground. "She's a liar!" he panted, glaring at the others. "She's a rotten liar, and anybody who repeats what she said will get what she got." When Lake learned of what had happened, he did not send for Bemin at once. He wondered why Bemin's reaction had been so quick and violent, and there seemed to be only one answer. Bemin's belly was still a little fat. There could be but one way he could have kept it so. He summoned Craig, Schroeder, Barber, and Anders. They went to the chamber where Bemin slept, and there, almost at once, they found his cache. He had it buried under his pallet and hidden in the cavities along the walls. Dried meat, dried fruits and milk, canned vegetables. It was an amount amazingly large, and many of the items had presumably been exhausted during the deficiency disease attack. "It looks," Schroeder said, "like he didn't waste any time feathering his nest when he made himself leader." The others said nothing, but stood with grim, frozen faces, waiting for Lake's next action. "Bring Bemin," Lake said to Craig. Craig returned with him 2 minutes later. Bemin stiffened at the sight of his unearthed cache, and color drained away from his face. "Well?" Lake asked. "I didn't—" Bemin swallowed. "I didn't know it was there." And then, quickly, "You can't prove I put it there. You can't prove you didn't just now bring it in yourselves to frame me." Lake stared at Bemin, waiting. The others watched Bemin, as Lake was doing, and no one spoke. The silence deepened, and Bemin began to sweat as he tried to avoid their eyes. He looked again at the damning evidence, and his defiance broke. If I hadn't taken it, it would have been wasted on people who were dying," he said. He wiped at his sweating face. "I won't ever do it again. I swear I won't." Lake spoke to Craig. You and Barber take him to the lookout point." "What?"